basically, you need to work with your stakeholders to try to define your mission, and this is going to include a lot of very sensitive discussions because you're going to need to try to finesse some things and make some bad expectations go away. And you could say, oh, that's going to be hard. Well, yeah, but it's going to be easier than having people labor under the disillusion or the misillusion that you're doing some particular thing, and then you're not. That ultimately is, you can ignore that for some amount of time, but it is a ticking bomb. As I've mentioned before, dissatisfied stakeholders have a way of making that dissatisfaction known. So define your mission and then figure out how you're going to actually succeed at achieving that mission and measure that you do. Now, I mentioned quality assurance on the previous slide, and I want to follow up on that a little bit because this is another thing that we see with clients is this taking sole responsibility for quality. And one of the ways that you know that there's some sort of problem here is if uniformly the reaction to field failures is always, why did you guys miss that? Why did the test team miss that? If that's the reaction as opposed to, wow, gee, it's just too bad that the developers put that bug in there, or it's too bad that we didn't capture that requirement, or it's too bad that we have this design problem, you should be concerned when there's this perception that no matter what happened upstream, the fact that we were at the very end of the process didn't catch anything, and that's our fault that thing is still there, that's a problem. That indicates a bad expectation that needs to be dealt with. Now, that expectation is sometimes our fault. And the reason I say that is I think this is, you define a test team as quality assurance team, because it's called quality assurance, and then you don't have a clearly defined mission or goals or objectives with measurable performance indicators, success criteria for those goals, then what expectation does that phrase quality assurance set up? And there's a major disconnect between this measuring quality at the end versus assuring quality. As I said before, you're putting something on a scale doesn't change what it weighs. So you really have to be clear on this, that if an organization wants a quality assurance role, if it really wants that, as opposed to just saying, oh, we need QA, but really understanding quality assurance, this is something that's involved early, and it drives the process from beginning to end with the goal of optimizing quality, within certain constraints, of course, but really driving process. Requirements reviews, design reviews, code reviews, static analysis of code, automated unit testing, continuous integration, some sort of stepwise component integration testing, all the way through prior to handed off to an independent test team. That's stuff that you'd have to drive if you wanted to be a quality assurance team. Now, maybe people don't want that. Maybe they go, oh, no, we don't want to put you to that much charge. Okay, that's cool. You can still do something extremely valuable at the end, which is determine the level of residual risk and let management decide. So, you transform yourself from being the owner of quality to being an assessor. And this does not conflict with what I was talking about before, about when you deliver bad news, deliver solutions too. Those are consistent. You can be an assessor but not a disinterested one. I'm not saying be disinterested and pretend you don't care whether the project succeeds or fails. But I'm saying I'm going to focus on getting the best information about the residual level of quality risk at the end of the process. That's what I'm going to focus on. Then that's great, and everything else is a byproduct. Okay, because this ties into the next classic tester mistake, being an unappointed process cop, trying to make change happen in the process upstream without any authority. I'll give you an anecdote on this one because this is important and it's an easy trap to fall into. Did a project for a client once in Paris, and we were there to help them build a unit testing framework, and so this is kind of tangential to the main thrust of our engagement. But I always like to, in an engagement like this, get a sense of who's who and what their needs are, and there was some possible reuse opportunities for this unit testing harness too in the system testing arena. So it made sense to do some amount of discussion about the relationship between development and test with the different parties. So I asked the director of development, I'll just call him Boris. I asked Boris, what do you think of the QA manager? And I'll call her Natasha. And we were in a conference room. The door was open. The guy got up and closed the conference room door, which is always a sign that you're about to hear something really interesting. He sat down. He looked at me. He said, Natasha is a narcissistic dilettante. And I didn't mean that as a compliment. And I said, oh, why is that? He said, well, she regularly goes into the development area, and the way they had like these open office layouts, so you'd have developers all sitting together in this big open room and testers sitting together. Said she regularly goes into the development area and starts to harangue and lecture the developers about things like unit testing and static analysis and so forth, and this always creates a great deal of dissension and unhappiness amongst my team. And they come to me and they say, we don't understand why she's lecturing us about this stuff. Her testing operation's a complete mess. She should mind her own knitting and not be coming in here and getting in our way. And that makes sense. That made perfect sense. She wasn't very technical, so she really wasn't in a position to give a lot of good advice, and she was just lecturing them. And so how did this happen? Well, the way this happened was she was promoted into the QA position, and she'd never done QA before. She hadn't been a programmer before either. She was not a technical person. So she got promoted into that QA director position. And so she went to the VP who promoted her and said, what do I do? What is my ambit here? What is my mission? And he said, well, I don't know. You just do QA. So she went and bought a book on QA, and this was one of those books that talked about QA very much from a process point of view. So she thought, oh, okay, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. So she goes, says to her boss, so, when the book says I need to do this, 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 and this, is that right? And he said, well, whatever the book says, it must be right. Now, the problem was he didn't communicate that to other people. And so here she is running around making a nuisance of herself from the perception of the development team at the behest of the VP of development overall, without that being effectively communicated to the director of development. Now, let me be clear on what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that we shouldn't care whether we get good requirements. Obviously, well-defined requirements are good. If you listen to my talk about Agile testing challenges a while ago, you know that what not having an adequately defined test basis can create a lot of challenges. Not having an adequately defined test oracle can create a lot of challenges. But what are you going to do? Same thing with unit testing. You go, it's good to get unit tested code. It's good to get solid code. But what are you going to do? Do you actually have the authority to make that happen? And has that authority been properly delegated to you? Not like what happened with Natasha. So here's what I would suggest. You want to make a change in an organization. Instead of running around telling people about how good it will be after they make the change, focus on the pain. What we found in our assessments is demonstration of people, sales truism, that people